Michael Heppner, who some of you know and many of the rest of you will enjoy getting to know him, is president of GK Training and Communications.
I'm here today to talk about a different way of teaching communication. Once upon a time, there was a woman who had to give talks in public, and she didn't like doing it. And in fact, the more she prepared and worked on those talks, actually the worse she became, the worse her performance became. And she was trapped in something I call the vicious cycle of bad communication, and that looks like this. When she wasn't feeling confident, she tended not to make eye contact. When she didn't make eye contact, she got less nonverbal feedback from her audience. With less nonverbal feedback, she needed to change what she was doing less, so she had less vocal variety. When she had less vocal variety, she needed less breath. With less breath, her carriage collapsed more. When her carriage collapsed more, she looked to the floor more, and we're back to bad eye contact. And the cycle continues and continues and continues. Maybe you know someone who can relate to that struggle. Maybe you can relate in some way to that struggle. Anyway, this woman comes to me to work on this communication habit. And I said to her, let's have one simple goal. Let's find one thing you can do, not think about or feel, but do, to be a more effective communicator with any audience, even an audience of one. And I actually have the same goal for us today too, which is this. I hope you all walk out of here with one thing you can do to be a more effective communicator or to help someone else you support be a more effective communicator. My name is, was said before, Michael Chad Heppner, and I'm the president of this company, GK Training and Communications. And the G and the K stand for genuine know-how, because that's what we strive to give people. Actual know-how, tools, things people can do to come across as their most genuine selves. And most of my time is spent helping people speak better. Now, that example I just used was about public speaking, but a lot of my time is spent working with lawyers and others on more day-to-day communication situations. Having strong presence, exuding charisma or confidence, running meetings effectively, those sorts of things. And you would be surprised at how diverse the people seeking my help are. I teach at Columbia Business School in the PhD and the MBA programs. I work with senior partners of law firms, CEOs, all the way down to high school students. And the struggles people have are the same in all those walks of life, which is strange in a way because it's not as though I'm teaching rocket science. Ostensibly, this should be a completely redundant skill, like getting someone's help to learn how to swallow food. And even that's a bad analogy because we come out of the womb ready to communicate. The first thing a healthy baby does is communicate very loudly and effectively that it is here and none too happy to be here. It actually takes a couple days to learn how to line up the coordination of swallowing food. I know about this because my wife and I have a newborn baby at home, so I've been studying this order of operations. 8 days ago. That's exactly right, 8 days old. Thank you. Thank you very much. I assure you I don't deserve the applause. My wife does. And she thanks you from New York City. She's not here. Anyway, so how do we get so messed up with something that should be so innate, like communication? Well, 3 places. The first is the world. And chairs are one of the primary culprits for that, but that's a subject of a different talk. The second place is ourselves. We shoot ourselves in the foot. And the woman I just referenced earlier was a prime example of not helping herself out. But the third place is this. Other people. Other people mess us up. How? Trying to sabotage us? No, very, very rarely. Actually, it's often people trying to help us, which is ironic, of course, because no one wins with bad communication. I promise you, you didn't walk into this room saying, I can't wait to see a really long PowerPoint that is dreadfully boring, just as I didn't walk up here saying, I cannot wait to go on too long and dreadfully bore this entire audience. People want to excel, and other people want to help those people excel. We just don't always know how. Let me give you an example. If I were to say to a client, don't be nervous, raise your hand if you think the client would actually be more nervous, not less. Those of you with your hands in the air, you're exactly right. And this is the same trick as don't think about a pink elephant. It's called thought suppression, and it turns out that humans are terrible at suppressing our thoughts. A colleague of mine, a guy named Adam Galinsky, brilliant scholar, has done a bunch of research on this, and it turns out that giving a human brain a don't is the equivalent of telling a 10-year-old kid, I'm going away for the weekend. Whatever you do, don't look in that spooky, mysterious wardrobe in the scary part of the house. See you on Monday. So the million-dollar question is this: how do we give people things that they can use to interrupt the vicious cycle of bad communication and tap into a virtuous cycle of good communication with something they can do and repeat whenever they want? And the answer is this: teach them how to rely on their bodies more and their brains less. To walk and talk better, to say smarter stuff, and to retain those skills forever, just like riding a bicycle. Let me give you an example of this. This is an executive we worked with. Go ahead and take a look.
So I will present two examples of work we've done with other clients and to help them package their assets to sell in the marketplace.
So you might notice a few things right off the bat. And by the way, this client was very happy with his progress, so he gave us permission to use his footage, just so you know. You might notice a few things right off the bat. He says a lot of ums. His face barely moves. He looks down most of the time. Those are technical observations, but the overall effect is this: the idea he's recommending doesn't look like a good one. This person, by the way, is passionate about what he does. He loves his job. He absolutely does. He loves his job, but you can't tell that by the way in which he communicates. But here's the question: does he already know that? Does he know at times he lacks charisma, lacks confidence? Yes, he knows all those things. He hears that as feedback all the time, and he hears it the most in his own head, over and over and over again. So we don't tell him the same things he's heard countless times before. We start somewhere else, somewhere entirely different. We stick a cork in his mouth. Now, by the way, the volume is low here on purpose because you can't understand what he's saying because he has a cork in his mouth. So don't listen, but just watch. You might notice some different things. His face is more alive and open. His brow is moving. He's smiling. He's nodding. His left hand is coming alive with a gesture of life. But most dramatically of all, his eye contact is radically transformed. Now, what is fascinating is this. With this particular coaching process, we never told this client, open your face more, lift your brow, smile, use gestures, or have better eye contact. Not a single time. All that came along for free when we helped his body experience a larger, more open way of using more of himself to fight past that impediment to communicate more effectively. Once his body experiences that muscle memory of using more of himself to communicate effectively, it remembers it, and you can take away the kinesthetic learning tool.
So we've seen in the news that Pyeongchang 2018, they're going to sell sponsorships, and we really need to get involved and start talking with companies who are interested in becoming Olympic sponsors. I have prepared for you documents that we have used in the past, and actually we're using them right now.
That tool right there, that is an example of a kinesthetic tool, the cork, that we use to help clients experience a different way of communicating. It's a principle, by the way, that goes back to ancient Greece, using an impediment to force yourself to communicate more powerfully. Some of you are nodding who maybe know about Demosthenes, an ancient Greek orator. But let me show you two others that we've designed specifically for clients at GK. The first addresses that vexing problem of filler language, ums and uhs. But even as I say vexing problem, filler language, ums and uhs, they're not a problem, they're a symptom of not choosing our language as deliberately and as specifically as we could. But do we tell clients, don't say No, we don't. What do? We ask them to imagine that they are an Olympic gymnast and they're walking on a balance beam and choosing the placement of their feet as specifically and deliberately as that gymnast might, and choosing their words equally specifically. Here's a second one. This gets at a communication habit of trailing off ineffectively at the ends of thoughts in two ways. One, inflecting up at the end of everything you say, so it sounds like you're asking questions constantly, no matter what you're talking about, and asking for permission and never actually making a statement. Or the opposite, its cousin, which is vocal fry, which is you trail off the end of things like that, and you lose all vocal support. And by the way, these two things are made most famous currently by millennials, which I guess you've already been beating up on a little bit. I have nieces and nephews who are millennials, so I'm allowed. But those patterns are by no means isolated just to millennials. Do we say to people, don't inflect up constantly, or don't use vocal fry? No, we don't. Far more effective, have that millennial or someone else take a Post-it note, and at the ends of your sentences, firm that Post-it note down on the table very deliberately on the final word of your sentence. You might be asking yourselves, so does this guy ask every person he works with to do extreme physical things? And the answer is yes. This is a momentum drill that is designed to avoid the habit of losing steam the longer you speak. This is a drill with a fencing foil that teaches forward powerful articulation. This is a boxing drill that is designed to build a cohesive, structured argument. Why do these things work? Simple. They force a new physical and vocal pattern that in turn grooves a new neurological pathway that can be practiced, honed, and mastered. It starts as a habit, becomes a pattern, and then soon becomes the norm. And it does all of that, circumventing all that old negative messaging we might have in our brains at any given time. People improve dramatically and they hang on to it. So here is my call to action to each of you, should you choose to embrace it. If you are trying to become a better communicator or support other people, which is likely your role, in becoming better communicators, I invite you to try two things. First, don't say don't, followed by a general suggestion. I'll give you an example that I heard a senior partner at a firm tell to a junior associate. Are you ready? Don't hold back, just be more assertive. That was the exact, very helpful piece of feedback. Instead of that, try this. Use your T's, your D's, and your L's more effectively, enunciate them more to insert your opinion into conversations, and discipline yourself to contribute at least once to every interaction you have throughout the day. Something people can do. Number two, if you have a bad communication habit you're trying to overcome or help someone else overcome, like filler language, like something like that, try working kinesthetically. Now, we don't have time in a 15-minute format to go over every drill you could arm yourself with, but as a support to the PDC, if you have something on your mind that you would like some help with, let us know and we will send you a resource. When you walk out of this room, a representative from the PDC will hand you a little flyer that has a review of what we just talked about. You can keep that part. You can fold it up. That's a mobile app for you all to take home. The second page, though, is this. It's a checklist of habits that we see people do that shoots themselves in the foot as communicators. Check one or more of those boxes, write your email address, give it back to us, and we will send you guided video resources that are actual kinesthetic drills designed to address these very habits. The last thing that I want to say is this. Remember the woman who I mentioned at the beginning of this talk? She did, in fact, find a way to disrupt the vicious cycle of bad communication. And she did so effectively that her talks in public got her a job. She was a sociology PhD student seeking a teaching position, and she had to give talks in public about her research. That PhD took her 7 years to get. Her education, her research, her dissertation, 7 years. In those 7 years, how many minutes, and you probably know the answer, how many minutes of formal voice, speech, or movement training did she have? Zero. 0 minutes. Think of that ratio. 7 years to 0 minutes. And yet, all of those 7 years were being evaluated consistently based solely on how well she could communicate about them. How long did she work with me? 6 hours. 6 hours. Now, I am not saying that to impress you about me. The heavy lifting was hers. She worked hard for that. That is all her. But what I am saying is to impress upon you the value of spending even a little bit of time focused on your communication, or more importantly, the communication of those who you support. Thanks very much.